Good morning, everybody. I'd like to start by thanking everyone for being here and asking if questions could be held until the end. We are the project management and process improvement for complex, low volume manufacturing group, working with Landscape Form Studio 431 department. Included in this group are myself, Joshua Bilski, Matt Tomkiel, Will Massey, Ben Sinclair, and Kevin Kuiper. Just a little overview of what is going to be included within this presentation. We will begin with myself giving some background on Landscape Forms in their Studio 431 department. I will then hand it off to Ben to talk a little bit more about the project scope. Following that, Will and Matt will go into depth on our design procedure and overall methodology. And to wrap it up, Kevin will be talking about conclusions and our group recommendations. Landscape Forms is an industry leader in premier outdoor furniture. They have been working for over 50 years with some of the world's best industrial designers. Within Landscape Forms, their Studio 431 department represents their custom division. Studio 431 produces cutting-edge custom products while exploring with new materials, processes, and outdoor space. Throughout this process, our main point of contact included Michael, the president of the Landscape Forms Studio 431 division, as well as the handful of project managers throughout their team. Some of the previous projects for Landscape Forms Studio 431 include in the top right corner, the 50th anniversary US Open seating. Directly below that is the ProMedica corporate campus in Promenade Park. This includes some custom litters, tables, and chairs. To the left of that is the Lakeview Lowline custom cubbies. Finally, to the left of that is the Coachella Valley Link. Some of the known issues within Studio 431 that were brought to us at the beginning of the project include their rapid growth. Studio 431 is growing at a faster rate than their current processes can keep up with. Next, Landscape Form Studio 431 did not have a consistent, concrete, and repeatable process. Lastly, coupling those two together, the Studio 431 department were unable to sustain their large growth from an information and processing perspective. I'm now going to hand it over to Ben to talk more about the project scope.
Our scope evolved a lot within the beginning phases of this project. We began to really understand our clients' needs and expectations after the first process mapping activity we attended with the whole project management team. The process mapping activity will be explained later in this presentation, but as a group, we determined the goal of this project would be to create an agile process to quickly adapt to project complexities within Studio 431. The three deliverables listed will be explained in greater detail, and they include a map of the current process, an optimized process map with revisions making the previous process more efficient, as well as we will introduce several agile project management ideas that fit the complexity and needs of Studio 431 projects. There are also several constraints brought to our group during the initial meetings. One constraint, we will not be looking into changing the manufacturing systems within Studio 431. They have the capacity to produce current projects now, as well as the predicted growth of projects in the future. And lastly, we will not be looking into the staff and what each member does within their department. Simply put, we focused on providing a more efficient process map as well as agile ideas to benefit the project management team. In order to implement agile ideas, we first had to get a deeper understanding of the difference between agile and waterfall project management. The graphic provides a visual on how they are separate processes used in project management. Waterfall typically involves definable work with low rates of change. Production and processes are usually well understood and stable. An example of this would be in the automobile industry. They're typically dealing with long manufacturing runs of the same design, and these processes in production typically stays constant. Waterfall is best implemented in project teams that deal with repeatable work and have proved successful on similar projects in the past. Agile, on the other hand, involves high uncertainty projects that have high rates of change, complexity, and risk. Agile approaches projects in shorter cycles to quickly adapt to any uncertainties. This agile typically involves newer design, more problem solving, and more exploratory work than waterfall project management, and it usually requires high collaboration, communication, and problem solving to create a solution. So for this, this was our process mapping activity that we did. It was up until this time, Studio 431 didn't really have a documented map of their processes. So this activity was very informative for us as well as for them. This activity gave us a lot of insight into how each department takes their process from start to finish. And it also gave us more information that we need to help make improvements for our revised process. And next, Matt is going to talk about some of the activities we did to gain further information on the processes within each department.
Yeah, so another activity our team accomplished were the one-on-one interviews with each of the department heads. The purpose of these interviews was to gain further insight on company operations, and then as well as help us understand the current process even more. Not only were we able to answer our main questions, we were able to derive valuable takeaways that will be further mentioned in the next couple slides. Our interviews were held with one person from each of the following departments: the senior project manager, the supply chain analyst, the manufacturing lead, as well as the engineering lead. As far as the questions, we focused the main concepts throughout each interview on two questions. First, how would a new team member learn about the current process at Landscape Form Studio 431? And if there was one thing in the entire process that you could fix, what would it be? We chose these two questions because we thought they would give us the most insight on company process as well as information we could not get from the first mapping activity. Now we will transition to the results of our analysis. We'll further go into the data derived from the employee interviews, and I'll pass it to Will to talk about the revised process mapping, which was the physical activity as well as the digital workflow. So now with that, let's get into the employee interviews and the key takeaways. I want to first mention that the feedback and the responses we heard from these interviews were very beneficial to our group as far as the value and what we were able to understand from them. The information we received from these interviews helped form the foundation of how we came about to our recommendations. Now to talk about each one of these takeaways. The first was capacity planning. 4 out of 4 people we interviewed said that this was one of their biggest problems that hindered their work. What this means is that there wasn't one tool or resource where someone can check what resources are available, such as space on the floor, or what employees are currently working on what projects. The next key takeaway was the ineffective dashboard. 3 out of 4 of the people we interviewed said that the current dashboard tool is not serving its purpose and needs to be replaced with something more user-friendly. For those that don't know what the dashboard is, it's the company's self-created program that basically shows all active and past projects as well as the information that goes along with each project. Next was the accountability on deadlines. Another thing that was brought up was the accountability, specifically regarding missed deadlines and due dates. There would be times where projects become buried and deadlines would be missed and not updated. What this would do was cause the projected timing to go off of the original quote, and this would cause further delays for Studio 431. Lastly, we have the engineering drawings. From the interviews, we recognized that there was a lot of time being lost in back and forth exchanges between engineering and fabrication. There were times where engineering hands off what is supposed to be the final drawings to kick off fabrication, and it turns out that the drawings have multiple errors that cause delays. Our recommendations will address this situation, and now we'll have Will to talk about the revised process mapping activity results.
Thank you, Matt. In this slide, you can see our updated process map. Originally, we planned on following the same template as the original process map shown previously in the first process mapping activity slide. Instead, we decided to go in a different direction. We decided that it would be more beneficial if we mapped out the flow of the processes by department. We found with the original process map, activities could get lost and it was hard to follow the flow. In the individual department process maps, we found that the activities can be clearly understood and easily followed. The next step that we took as a team was to clean up our revised process maps. The tool that we used to make our improved process maps was Mural. Mural is an interactive digital whiteboard software that allows for easy collaboration. We found that with using this software, it was very helpful and it looked a lot better than our messy handwritten sticky notes. In this video, we wanted to show the power of the Mural software that we used to make our revised process flow. With Mural software, we were able to use an outline to break up the process maps into different departments. Departments that we included in our revised map were sales and estimating, project management, engineering, supply chain, and manufacturing. Based off the initial information that we received from the original process mapping activity and the interviews we conducted, we were able to identify a few areas where we could make improvements. The first area of improvement was found between the engineering and supply chain teams. One area of possible improvement that was identified in interviews was to make a faster decision on insourcing or outsourcing. In order to determine the capacity needed from manufacturing based off the engineering design, the supply chain team should be involved early on in the engineering design review with manufacturing. This will help supply chain know what the capacity of manufacturing is on a given project, which will help them make a quicker decision on whether to insource or outsource. In our process flow for supply chain, we added a meeting with engineering and manufacturing to review capacity before the resource management allocation was completed. We did this in order to speed up the supply chain decision. In our revised engineering process, we started by adding in the meeting with the supply chain at the same time as the concept review with manufacturing team, and we just went over why we thought that was important. Another area of improvement was between engineering and manufacturing. Currently, manufacturing is getting the designs for the product too late and have to go back and forth with engineering after the design is already reviewed with the client. It is important that the manufacturing team reviews the 3D model before it is reviewed with the client because they need to make sure that they can actually make that product. With that being said, we decided that it was important to switch to the order that manufacturing reviews the concept with when the client reviews the 3D model. So in our process flow, we decided to switch those two because it will save time because the engineering and manufacturing teams will not have to go back and forth in order to sign off on the design. So along with the changes that we just showed you in this video, our team also changed the flow and order of some of the other tasks. We found that with some of these activities, they were taking place as predecessors or successors when they could all happen at the same time. With the changes that we made, our team hopes that we'll be able to save Studio 431 time on their future projects. Next up to discuss our conclusion and recommendations will be Kevin.
Thank you, Will. Here are some conclusions we've drawn based on these results. As we presented, the first thing we did for this project was to create a baseline process map of the current process. From there, we were able to take that information and create a process flow for each of the departments with a couple of key areas identified for improvement. We anticipate that if these changes are implemented, landscape forms will be able to shave time and cost off their projects. Some of the tools and resources that we used were Mural, Microsoft Projects, Microsoft Excel, physical mapping sessions, and interviews. Based on our work, we would like to make the following recommendations. We recommend that landscape forms take the work that we've completed to this point and continue to refine it and improve it. At that point, we suggest that the process map by department is formalized and implemented within the different departments. This will allow new team members a place to go to understand the process, as well as for existing team members to reference. We would also suggest adding more frequent checkpoints within the process. Some of these points include between project management and fabrication, supply chain and engineering, and within engineering itself. Project management and fabrication, in order to ensure alignment between manufacturing and the project. As we've heard from the interviews, capacity planning is something that can be further improved. Supply chain and engineering. A touch point here would allow supply chain to make versus buy considerations earlier, including vetting different vendors. And within engineering. Engineering has one of the longer lead times of the departments. We have learned through interviews and talking with employees that engineering can vary greatly. More frequent outward communication helps to ensure that all of these teams downstream are able to adjust accordingly. Some recommendations that we have out of scope of this project include more formal checkpoints between binder handoffs, a need for a single common program that tracks capacity and resources that will replace the dashboard, and continuous and active project management. Recommendations for implementing agile concepts: incorporate 2-week planning sessions with each of the departments. This would be led by someone on each of the department teams and facilitate a check on the completed progress and facilitate any corrections if need be. Daily Scrum meetings would allow all the team members to stay on the same page. These are simple 15-minute progress check-ins. This would help facilitate any questions and identify any potential roadblocks. Implement an in-office visual in the common area that would allow for full transparency of the project status. Focus on strengthening the team's ability to respond to change and be less reliant on sticking to a strict plan. Lastly, we would suggest that the team take additional training on Agile. Some forms of training include webinars and training courses from organizations such as ASEM and PMI. Some acknowledgements. We would like to thank Michael Blum and the rest of the Landscape Forum Studio 431 team for providing continual assistance and advice. We also appreciate the support from Dr. Larry Malik and Professor Dr. Betsy Aller. Thank you for watching our presentation. At this time, we would like to ask if there are any questions.
I have a question. You interviewed 4 of the leads in each of the areas, asking them for input regarding improvements. Did you get any information from them regarding what currently works well? I know it wasn't part of your agenda, but did they provide information about that?
Yeah, so that was part of the, that kind of got answered when we asked them, where do you go to find current information? We kind of got good feedback because they do teach the new employees the process fairly effectively. So they were saying they do an extensive shadowing to kind of begin learning more and more about the process and how they operate. So we did get a lot of good feedback saying that they have a good kind of intro phase for new employees where they can kind of slowly learn and shadow someone that knows what they're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Question for you, team. So, coronavirus notwithstanding, what barriers do you see for the recommended actions to be implemented in landscape forms?
I'll take that question, Dr. Malik. I don't see any significant barriers for the team. Really, to take something like Agile and implement it in a system that's more traditional, it really takes some buy-in from the team. So I think that would be one of the biggest changes, is just taking that buy-in from the team. And going from that traditional strict flow to a more flexible flow will take some getting used to.
I know you mentioned different forms of training, but okay, go ahead.
And just kind of building off what Kevin was saying with the buy-in, they talked about implementing different resources to keep their projects organized. If the resources are only as good as the information that they implement into those resources. So if they continue to be vigilant on implementing their current status on projects, then I don't really see any barriers in keeping an organization within their revised process.
How would you rate their readiness for this type of change? Was there a general sense that this change needs to occur among the people that you both interviewed and interacted with at Landscape, other than, of course, the project lead? Or just comment on that, please.
I think they definitely are ready to implement like the stuff that we came up with, but it's been hard for them. They've wanted to do it for a long time, but with the rapid growth that they experienced, they kind of got buried by that and put it on the back burner. So as a team and as a Studio 431, they definitely want to make this change because they know they're going to have to keep up with all the new business that they're getting. So it's just a matter of, now we were able to bring them some information on how it can be done. So I think that they will be willing to make this change because we made it a little bit easier on them to kind of identify areas that they can make those changes.
Well, that's good. It sounds like they have the willingness, and they just need a little more on the ability and the technical side to make this happen. Mm-hmm. Thank you, guys.
I was going to ask a question. You guys mentioned Scrum. You didn't explain it. Can I assume that they are already using Scrum in some format?
I wouldn't say that in an agile sense they're using Scrum. It's more informal, really. They do they work in the same area, so they kind of check in with each other throughout the day, but they don't necessarily have a formal stand-up Scrum meeting in the mornings.
Okay. Are they all familiar with that concept, do you think, or?
I think that they have a general familiarity with it, but I don't think all of the team members do. So the project managers and the president are familiar with the concept, though.
So that would be, as you recommended, they need to get some more training. Maybe some Scrum training would be a good idea too. There's a lot of it out there now.
Yeah. All right. Are there any more questions? All right. If there are no more questions at this time, we'll conclude this presentation. Please feel free to contact us via email or connect with us on LinkedIn. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Matt?